A paralyzed baby falls asleep. But what the dog did next is a miracle. On a worn blue carpet, a fragile child drifts off, and the family's new German shepherd curls tight around him like a living shield. Moments later, the baby's lips turn blue. The mother panics. But the dog doesn't move. He knows something no one else does. And when the truth comes out, it's not just about saving one breath, it's about exposing a dangerous secret. Powerful people would do anything to keep hidden. How far will a desperate mother and her loyal dog go to protect a helpless child? And what terrifying price will they pay when the walls close in? I'd love to know. Where are you watching from? Type it down below, and while you're here, subscribe so you'll always catch the next story. Iona Duval smoothed out a wrinkle in the threadbare blue carpet, her fingers tracing the worn fibers that had seen better days. The afternoon light filtered through thin curtains, casting gentle shadows across the living room floor of her modest apartment. With practiced care, she laid 8-month-old Keaton down on the carpet's softest spot, the place where she always set him for his afternoon playtime. Bracken, their newly adopted German shepherd, padded over silently. His golden and black coat caught the sunlight as he settled himself around Keaton like a protective fortress. Ione couldn't help but smile at how quickly the former search and rescue dog had bonded with her baby. His amber eyes watched the infant with an intensity that sometimes surprised her. "Good boy, Bracken," she whispered, running her hand through his thick fur. The dog had brought unexpected warmth to their little family, filling an empty space she hadn't even realized was there. A sharp knock shattered the peaceful moment. 3 hard raps that made Ione's heart jump in her chest. She hurried to the door, casting a backward glance at Bracken and Keaton. The dog hadn't moved an inch, maintaining his protective curl around the baby. When she opened the door, Pierce Greeley's smugly superior expression made her stomach twist. The landlord thrust a paper toward her chest, his expensive shirt stretching across his paunch as he leaned forward. 72-hour eviction notice, he announced, clearly savoring each word. Unauthorized animal on the premises. Clear violation of your lease agreement, Mrs. Duval. Ione's fingers crumpled the paper's edge. That's not legal. You can't evict us with just 3 days' notice. I can and I will. Greeley's false charm cracked, revealing the malice beneath. No pets allowed. It's in black and white. He's not just a pet. Ione shot back, stepping into the hallway and pulling the door nearly closed behind her. Bracken helps with Keaton. He's essential to our family. Essential? Greeley scoffed. A mangy mutt. Get rid of it or you're out, both of you. His eyes gleamed with satisfaction. 72 hours. Tick-tock. You can't do this. Ione's voice rose, echoing in the narrow hallway. We have rights. Rights? Greeley laughed. An ugly sound. You're month-to-month, sweetheart. I can do whatever I want. A muffled thump from inside the apartment caught Ione's attention. She whirled around, maternal instinct flaring. Something wasn't right. This isn't over! She snapped at Greeley, turning back to the door. 72 hours! He called after her as she rushed inside. The sight that greeted her stopped her heart. Bracken hadn't moved from his spot on the blue carpet, but his posture had changed. Instead of relaxed vigilance, every muscle in his body seemed taut with urgency. He stared at her with intense eyes, then looked down at Keaton. The baby's lips had taken on a frightening bluish tinge. No, no, no! Ione gasped, dropping to her knees. She reached for Keaton, but Bracken wouldn't budge. The big dog held his ground, pressing his body firmly against the baby's torso. Before panic could fully take hold, Ione noticed something remarkable. With each pressure from Bracken's body, Keaton's chest rose and fell more steadily. Suddenly, Bracken sprang up and darted to where Ione's phone lay on the coffee table. He snatched it carefully between his teeth and returned to her, dropping it into her trembling hands. His meaning was clear as day. Call for help. With shaking fingers, Ione dialed 911. My baby, she managed to say when the operator answered. He's having trouble breathing. Please hurry. The minutes until the paramedics arrived felt like hours, but Bracken never ceased his gentle, rhythmic pressure against Keaton's chest. Each time he pressed, the baby's breathing seemed to steady just a little more. When the emergency responders burst through the door, they found an extraordinary tableau: a mother holding her baby's tiny hand, and a dog performing what looked remarkably like a canine version of rescue breathing. The paramedics worked quickly and efficiently, stabilizing Keaton's breathing and preparing him for transport. As they lifted him onto the stretcher, one of them turned to Ione with raised eyebrows. "That's one special dog you've got there," he said, nodding toward Bracken, who watched the proceedings with alert attention. "If he hadn't kept your baby breathing—" He left the sentence unfinished, but Ione understood. As she followed the stretcher out, Bracken padding faithfully at her heels, the reality of what had just happened hit her full force. The dog hadn't simply been cuddling with Keaton. He had recognized a crisis and acted with purpose and precision. Without his intervention, without his urgent insistence on calling for help. Ione reached down and buried her fingers in Bracken's thick fur, drawing strength from his solid presence. In the space of one afternoon, everything had changed. They faced an impossible choice between keeping their home and keeping Bracken. But after what had just happened, it wasn't really a choice at all. This remarkable dog had saved her baby's life. He wasn't just a pet. He was their guardian angel with 4 paws and a heart of gold. The blue carpet where it had all unfolded lay silent in the empty apartment, bearing witness to the moment when a mother realized that sometimes protection comes in unexpected forms, and that true family isn't always bound by blood. Sometimes it's bound by unwavering loyalty and life-saving instinct. The fluorescent lights of St. Mary's Hospital cast harsh shadows across the waiting room where Ione sat, her fingers absently stroking Bracken's fur. The German Shepherd had been allowed to stay thanks to a sympathetic tech who recognized his calm, almost professional, demeanor. While other dogs might have been anxious in the hospital setting, Bracken remained perfectly composed, his amber eyes fixed on the double doors where they had taken Keaton. "Mrs. Duvall." A nurse appeared, clipboard in hand. "Dr. Keeler will see you now." Ione rose, her legs shaky from hours of waiting. "Can Bracken—" The nurse glanced at the dog, then shook her head. "Hospital policy. But Tommy can watch him." She gestured to the young tech who had advocated for Bracken earlier. "He'll be fine with me," Tommy assured her, already kneeling beside Bracken. "We're buddies now, aren't we, boy?" Bracken looked to Ione, waiting for her signal. At her nod, he settled beside Tommy, though his eyes never left her retreating form. The consultation room felt too small, too sterile. Dr. Armand Keeler stood before a light box, his crisp white coat matching his precisely trimmed silver hair. He barely looked up as Ione entered, absorbed in the dark images clipped to the illuminated panel. "Mrs. Duvall," he began, his tone carrying the weight of authority. "These scans show a concerning anomaly in your son's cervical spine." His manicured finger traced a shadow on the image. "Here, at the C4 vertebra, we're seeing what appears to be a lesion pressing against the spinal cord." Ione's heart seemed to stop. "A lesion? What does that mean?" "It means," Dr. Keeler turned to face her fully, "that your son requires immediate surgical intervention. The pressure on his spinal cord is likely causing his breathing difficulties. Without surgery, the condition will only deteriorate." The word surgery sent ice through Ione's veins. "But he's only 8 months old. Isn't there another way? Something less invasive?" Dr. Keeler's professional mask slipped slightly, revealing a flash of irritation. "Mrs. Duvall, this is a time-critical situation. Delay could result in permanent paralysis or worse. As a medical professional, I'm obligated to inform you that refusing necessary medical treatment could be grounds for involvement from Child Protective Services." The threat, though veiled, was clear. Ione's hands began to tremble. "I'm not refusing treatment," she said carefully. "I just need to understand all our options." Her phone buzzed in her pocket, a text message from Pierce Greeley. "Clock's ticking. Dog goes, or you both do. 72 hours. The walls seemed to close in. On one side, a powerful doctor pushing for immediate surgery. On the other, the threat of homelessness. Ione closed her eyes, trying to center herself. She thought of her father, gone now but always her voice of reason. "Trust your gut," he used to say. "When everyone's pushing you to rush, that's exactly when you need to slow down." "Dr. Keeler," she said, opening her eyes, "I understand your concerns. But I'm only authorizing observation for now. I want to monitor Keaton's condition before we commit to surgery." The doctor's face hardened. "I strongly advise against this course of action. The risks of delay, I understand the risks." Ione interrupted, surprising herself with her firmness. "But I'm his mother, and this is my decision. Please prepare the discharge papers for observation status." "Very well." Dr. Keeler's tone could have frozen water. "But I want it noted in his chart that you're proceeding against medical advice. Delays in this type of situation can be fatal, Mrs. Duval. I hope you can live with that decision." The words were meant to shake her resolve, but something deeper than fear steadied Ione's hand as she signed the discharge papers. Perhaps it was the memory of Bracken's sure instincts earlier that day, or maybe it was her father's voice in her head. Whatever it was, she knew in her bones that taking Keaton home was the right choice. When she emerged from the consultation room, Bracken rose immediately, padding over to press against her leg. His solid presence helped ground her as she collected Keaton, now peaceful in his sleep, monitoring leads still attached to his tiny chest. The discharge nurse reviewed the home care instructions, showing Ione how to work the portable monitor they were sending home. "Any changes in his breathing? Any alarms from the monitor? You bring him straight back, understand?" Ione nodded, tucking the eviction notice deeper into her coat pocket. That was tomorrow's battle. For now, she had won this one, keeping her son from a surgery that her instincts screamed against. As they walked out into the cool evening air, Keaton secure in her arms, and Bracken a steady presence at her side, Ione felt the full weight of what lay ahead. The doctor's warnings echoed in her mind, mixing with Greeley's threats. She had bought time, but at what cost? The discharge papers in her hand felt both like a victory and a burden, a mother's choice made under impossible pressure. Bracken's nose nudged her hand, drawing her attention down to his watchful face. In his eyes, she saw the same certainty she'd witnessed on that blue carpet when he'd known exactly what Keaton needed. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Mother, child, and the remarkable dog who had already proved himself more than just a pet. The hospital lights cast long shadows across the parking lot as they made their way to her car. Each step took them further from the sterile halls where others claimed to know what was best for her child, and closer to home, where another battle awaited, but where at least the choices would be her own. The key turned in the lock with a familiar click as Ione balanced Keaton against her shoulder. Bracken slipped in first, his nails clicking softly on the worn linoleum of the entryway. The apartment felt different now. Every shadow held a new weight, every quiet corner a potential worry. Ione gently laid Keaton in his portable crib, the monitoring leads from the hospital still blinking steadily. Her hands shook slightly as she reached for her phone. There was one person she knew would help make sense of all this, someone who had always given her father the straight truth, no matter how hard it was to hear. Cal Whitford answered on the second ring. "Ione? Everything okay?" His familiar voice, gruff but kind, brought tears to her eyes. "Cal, I need your help. Could you come over? It's about Keaton. Give me 15 minutes. True to his word, 14 minutes later, a solid knock announced Cal's arrival. He filled the doorframe, tall and broad-shouldered, his silver hair neat despite the late hour. He was still, wearing his work clothes, the kind of practical outfit that spoke of his years as a fire captain, even in retirement. "Tell me everything," he said, following her inside. As Ione explained the day's events, Cal's attention shifted between her, Keaton, and Bracken. The German shepherd hadn't moved from his position next to the portable crib, maintaining a careful watch over the sleeping infant. And see how he does that? Ione demonstrated how Bracken had applied pressure to Keaton's chest. It's like he knew exactly what to do. Cal knelt beside Bracken, studying the dog's posture and alert expression. This isn't just good instinct, he said slowly. This dog's had training. The stillness, that focused gaze, and the pressure response, classic medical alert behavior. But how? He was just a shelter dog. Sometimes trained dogs wash out of programs for various reasons. Cal reached out, letting Bracken sniff his hand. Doesn't mean they lose their skills? My guess? He was probably in search and rescue or medical alert training. Maybe didn't make the final cut for some technical reason, but the core training stuck. Hope flickered in Ione's chest. So when he alerts on Keaton, it's not random. He's picking up on something specific. Cal stood up, his knees cracking slightly. What we need is documentation. Every alert, every change in breathing, everything Bracken does, write it all down. Times, dates, patterns. Build a case. For the next hour, Cal helped Ione set up a simple but thorough monitoring system. They cleared space on the kitchen counter for the medical equipment from the hospital. Cal found a notebook, ruling neat columns. Time, breathing pattern, Bracken's behavior, other observations. The key is consistency, Cal explained, showing her how to note everything clearly. Good records beat bluster every time. That's what your dad always said. Ione smiled at the memory. He used to drive everyone crazy with his incident logs. And he was usually right. Cal's eyes crinkled. Remember that warehouse fire? His documentation proved the sprinkler system hadn't been properly maintained. Saved 3 families from losing everything in lawsuits. Together, they worked out a schedule for monitoring. Cal showed her how to properly position the breathing sensors, explaining what each reading meant. They taped emergency numbers to the refrigerator, hospital, pediatrician, and Cal's own number at the top. Call anytime, he insisted. Day or night. Bracken remained at his self-appointed post on the blue carpet, rising only once to get water before returning to Keaton's side. His dedication seemed to confirm Cal's assessment of his training. He's chosen his spot, Cal observed. Smart dog, best vantage point of the room, close enough to monitor breathing. As midnight approached, Cal helped Ione prepare for her first night with the new system. They checked battery levels on all monitors, packed a fresh diaper bag for emergencies, and reviewed the warning signs that would require immediate medical attention. Take pictures too, Cal advised. Everything you observe, document it. Your phone has timestamps. Use them. Build your case methodically. Ione walked him to the door, feeling more centered than she had all day. Cal, I can't thank you enough. He squeezed her shoulder gently. Your father was my best friend for 30 years. Looking out for you and Keaton, it's what he'd want. He glanced back at Bracken, still alert at his post. That dog's a gift, Ione. Trust his instincts, but back it up with data. That's how we'll figure this out. After Cal left, Ione stood in the quiet apartment, taking in the scene. The monitors blinked steadily, their soft beeps a reassuring rhythm. The notebook lay ready on the counter, columns waiting to be filled. The emergency numbers stood bright against the refrigerator door. Her diaper bag sat packed and ready by the door. For the first time since the morning's crisis, she felt like she had a plan. Not just reaction, but intention. She had allies now. Cal's steady experience, Bracken's remarkable instincts, and her own growing resolve to protect her son. Keaton slept peacefully, his chest rising and falling in an easy rhythm. Bracken's eyes met hers across the room, alert but calm. On the blue carpet where their day had begun in crisis, guardian and child had found their equilibrium. Ione settled into the armchair next to the portable crib, notebook in her lap. The first entry was simple. 11:45 p.m. Normal breathing. Bracken calm and alert. All monitors stable. It was a small thing, just ink on paper, but it felt like the beginning of something important. the first piece of evidence in a story they were just beginning to understand. The digital clock on the microwave blinked 11:58 when darkness swept through the apartment like a heavy curtain. One moment Ione was recording Keaton's steady breathing in her notebook, and the next she could barely see her own hand in front of her face. The sudden silence hit her first. The reassuring hum of the medical monitor died instantly. "No, no, no," Ione whispered, fumbling for her phone. The screen's glow offered little comfort as she checked the breaker panel in the hallway. Everything was off. Not just her apartment, the entire floor had gone dark. A familiar pressure built in her chest. She'd paid the electric bill. She knew she had. This wasn't random. Bracken's posture changed first. In the dim light from her phone, Ione saw his ears prick forward, his body going rigid beside Keaton. Then came the howl, one long, piercing note that made her blood run cold. It wasn't the bark of an alarmed dog. It was a deliberate warning. Ione dropped to her knees beside the portable crib, her hands finding Keaton in the darkness. His chest wasn't moving. "Baby, no," she breathed, lifting him carefully. Her mind raced back to the infant CPR class she'd taken during her pregnancy. A lifetime ago, it seemed now. The instructor's voice echoed in her memory. "Check for breathing. Clear the airway. 30 compressions, 2 breaths." Her fingers trembled as she tilted Keaton's head back slightly, supporting his neck. "Come on, sweetie. Breathe for Mama. 2 gentle breaths. Nothing." She began compressions, using 2 fingers pressed carefully against his breastbone. 1, 2, 3. She counted aloud, forcing herself to keep steady. 4, 5, 6. A sharp knock on the wall made her jump. "Hey, you okay in there?" It was Mrs. Chen from next door. "I heard the dog. I've got a flashlight if you need it." "Please," Ione called back, not stopping the compressions. 28, 29, 30. 2 more breaths. Still nothing. Mrs. Chen appeared in the doorway moments later, her flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. "Oh my God!" she gasped, seeing Ione performing CPR. "I'm calling 911. Call Cal Whitford, too." Ione managed between compressions. "His number's on my fridge." Another set of compressions. More rescue breaths. Bracken stayed close, his nose touching Keaton's hand, whining softly now. The minutes stretched like hours. Mrs. Chen's voice seemed far away as she spoke to the emergency dispatcher. Ione kept counting, kept breathing, kept praying. "Come on, baby. Please." Heavy footsteps pounded up the stairs, Cal taking them 2 at a time from the sound of it. He burst through the door carrying what looked like a car battery with outlets. "Portable power pack," he explained quickly, already connecting it to the medical monitor. "Used to keep these in the truck for emergencies." The monitor hummed to life just as Keaton gave a tiny gasp. Ione felt his chest rise under her hands, then fall, then rise again. Weak breaths, but breaths nonetheless. "That's it," she whispered, gathering him close. "That's my boy." Cal was already examining the breaker panel with his flashlight, his expression grim. "This wasn't an accident," he said, pointing to distinct marks around the lock. "Someone tampered with this. Recently, too. The scratches are fresh." Ione's hands shook as she took photos with her phone, making sure to capture the damage from multiple angles. The beam of Mrs. Chen's flashlight joined Cal's, illuminating more evidence of tampering. "I heard Mr. Greeley in the hallway earlier," Mrs. Chen offered, her voice shaking slightly. "Around 7 o'clock, he was on his phone something about taking care of a problem tenant." Cal pulled out his own phone, opening a recording app. "Mrs. Chen, would you mind stating that again for the record? And anything else you remember about what you heard or saw?" While Cal gathered statements from Mrs. Chen and other neighbors who had gathered in the hallway, Ione sat in the armchair, holding Keaton close. Bracken resumed his position on the blue carpet, but now he lay facing the door, his ears alert to every sound. The monitor's steady beeping felt like a lifeline in the darkness. Keaton's breathing was fragile but stable, each rise and fall of his chest a small victory. Ione touched her son's cheek, still cool from the crisis, and felt anger replace her fear. This wasn't just about an eviction anymore. This was about her son's life. Mrs. Chen brought over more flashlights and a thermos of hot tea. Other neighbors offered blankets, batteries, even a small camping lantern. In the soft light, Ione could see the concern on their faces. And something else. Recognition, perhaps, of how quickly safety could be stolen. Cal finished recording statements and joined Ione by the monitor. "Power company's on their way," he said quietly. "But this changes things. We're not just documenting medical issues anymore. We're building a case of deliberate endangerment." Ione nodded, watching Bracken's steady vigilance. The dog had known, had tried to warn them. Just like this morning on the blue carpet. Just like at the hospital. His instincts had been right every time. The portable monitor blinked steadily in the darkness, its rhythm matching Keaton's breathing. Outside, voices murmured as neighbors shared their own stories of Greeley's negligence and threats. Cal's phone recorded it all, building their case one testimony at a time. In the darkness of her apartment, surrounded by the unexpected kindness of neighbors and the unwavering presence of both Cal and Bracken, Ione felt something shift inside her. The fear was still there, but it was hardening into determination. Greeley had escalated the danger, thinking it would break her. Instead, it had only strengthened her resolve. The night stretched on, marked by the steady beeping of the monitor and Bracken's watchful presence. Every few minutes, Ione would check Keaton's breathing, each rise and fall of his chest a reminder of how close they'd come to losing everything. But they hadn't lost. They'd survived, and now they had proof. Proof of tampering, proof of intent, proof that would finally force someone to listen. Cal sat nearby, his phone continuing to record as more neighbors came forward with their stories. The darkness that was meant to isolate them had instead brought them together, creating a network of witnesses and allies. Each statement, each photo, each piece of evidence was another brick in the wall they were building against Greeley's threats. Mrs. Chen brought more tea and stayed, her flashlight joining the others in their vigil. Bracken remained at his post, his body positioned between the door and Keaton, ready to sound the alarm again if needed. The portable monitor blinked steadily, powered by Cal's emergency pack, a beacon of reassurance in the darkness. Cal Whitford sat in his truck, studying the worn business card in his hands. After 3 days of calling former K9 training facilities, he'd finally found someone who remembered a German shepherd matching Bracken's description. The address led him to a small training center on the outskirts of town, where metal kennels lined the gravel driveway. A stocky woman in cargo pants emerged from the office, wiping her hands on a towel. "Mike said you were asking about one of our washouts," she called. "Golden and black shepherd, right?" "That would be Bracken." "Yes, ma'am." Cal stepped out of his truck. "I'm trying to understand his background." He's with a friend now, and he's showing some remarkable medical alert behaviors. The trainer, who introduced herself as Sarah, nodded knowingly. That tracks. Bracken was something special in scent work and pressure responses. Could pick up seizures before they happened, detect blood sugar drops, real natural talent. But search and rescue? That was a bust. They walked toward a small sitting area, and Sarah pulled out a thick folder. "See, most SAR dogs need to work wide ranges, cover lots of ground. Bracken wouldn't go more than 50 yards from his handler. Kept circling back, checking in. Great for close medical monitoring, useless for field searches." Cal leafed through the training records, noting the consistent patterns. High marks for scent detection, alert timing, and therapeutic pressure application. Failed certifications for range work and area coverage. "Funny thing is," Sarah continued, "he was almost too good at the medical stuff. Would fixate on anyone showing signs of distress, try to alert even when he was supposed to be doing other tasks. We actually had to stop using him in group training because he'd abandon his exercises to check on other dogs or handlers if they seemed off." Meanwhile, across town at St. Michael's Hospital, Ione sat in a follow-up appointment with Keaton nestled in her arms. Bracken lay at her feet, his eyes tracking every movement in the examination room. When respiratory therapist Nella Pike entered, the shepherd's tail thumped once in recognition. Nella smiled warmly, checking Keaton's chart. "I see you've been keeping detailed logs," she said, gesturing to the notebook peeking from Ione's bag. "May I take a look?" Ione handed over 3 weeks' worth of careful observations, times, breathing patterns, Bracken's reactions, every incident documented in precise detail. Nella's eyes widened slightly as she read. "These patterns are interesting," she said carefully, glancing at the closed door. "Have they run any broader spectrum tests? For rare toxins, maybe?" Dr. Keeler's focused on the spinal surgery. Ione replied quietly. "He says we're losing time." Nella's lips pressed into a thin line. "I'd like to order some additional labs. Nothing that would interfere with his current treatment plan, just covering our bases." She pulled out several requisition forms. Stool samples, blood draws for serum analysis. Sometimes rare conditions can mimic neurological symptoms. As if on cue, Bracken shifted position, pressing gently against Keaton's side. The baby's breathing had started to shallow, something Ione might have missed if she hadn't been watching for it. Nella observed the interaction with keen interest. "How long before he does that does the breathing change usually start?" she asked, making notes. 2 to 3 minutes usually," Ione answered. "Sometimes longer if it's a gradual decline. He seems to read something we can't detect." Nella nodded, continuing to write. "I'm ordering these labs under my authority as his respiratory therapist. I'll make copies of everything for your records." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Dr. Keeler is an excellent surgeon, but sometimes we need to look at all possibilities." After completing the blood draw and collecting samples, Nella helped Ione document every step of the process. They made duplicate copies of all orders, and results would be sent directly to both the hospital and Ione's home address. Later that afternoon, Cal met Ione and Nella in the hospital cafeteria, well away from the neurology department. He shared what he'd learned about Bracken's training history, while Nella reviewed her concerns about the limited scope of testing so far. "The dog's alerts are consistent with his training background," Cal explained. "He's literally doing what he was best at, close-range medical monitoring. Sarah, his trainer, said he could detect pre-seizure states and blood sugar crashes before any visible symptoms." Nella leaned forward. "That fits with what we're seeing. The pressure he applies isn't random. It's targeted to support respiratory function. And his timing is incredible. He's catching changes before our monitors do." They spread their documentation across the table, Cal's training records, Ione's detailed logs, Nella's lab orders and clinical notes. A pattern emerged. Bracken's behavior wasn't just protective, it was precisely calibrated to Keaton's medical needs. "We need to be careful how we proceed," Nella warned. "Dr. Keeler has a lot of influence here, and he's very committed to his surgical approach. I've ordered the labs as routine respiratory follow-up, nothing that challenges his authority directly. And I've got copies of everything," Ione added, patting her expanding file folder. "Plus backups at home and with Cal." "Smart," Nella approved. "Document everything, keep copies secure, and wait for the lab results. Knowledge is power, especially in medicine." They developed a communication system. Nella would update them on test results through Cal, who could visit the hospital without drawing attention. Ione would continue her detailed logging of Keaton's symptoms and Bracken's responses. They would gather their evidence quietly, building their case while staying under the radar. As they left the cafeteria, Bracken padding silently beside them, Ione felt a new sense of purpose. They were no longer just reacting to threats. They were actively working to uncover the truth, supported by both medical expertise and documented evidence. Whatever came next from Keeler or Greeley, they would be prepared. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the apartment windows as Ione sat cross-legged on the blue carpet beside Keaton and Bracken. The German shepherd maintained his vigilant position, his head resting gently on the baby's stomach, rising and falling with each breath. Her phone buzzed. The caller ID showed Dr. Keeler's office. With trembling fingers, she answered. Ms. Duval. Dr. Keeler's voice was clipped, triumphant. I've secured an emergency court order for immediate surgical intervention. The ambulance is already en route. Your continued delay is endangering your child. Ione's heart hammered in her chest. The labs aren't back yet. This is no longer a matter for discussion. He cut her off. The order gives me full medical authority. Refuse to comply, and you'll face contempt charges. Before she could respond, heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. Through the door came Pierce Greeley's familiar aggressive knock, followed by unfamiliar voices. Animal control. Open up. Bracken's ears twitched, but he didn't move from his position. Keaton stirred slightly, and the shepherd adjusted his pressure, maintaining the steady contact that had kept the baby breathing steadily all afternoon. The knock came again, more insistent. Ms. Duval, we have orders to remove an unauthorized animal from the premises. Ione's hands shook as she reached for Keaton, but a firm voice called from the stairwell. I'll handle this. Cal Whitford's steady footsteps approached. She heard the rustle of papers and his calm, authoritative tone. Gentlemen, before you proceed, you'll want to review these documents. Through the door, she could hear Greeley's irritated response. This is a simple building code violation. Is it? Cal's voice hardened. Because I have here documented evidence of multiple code violations by the property owner. Tampering with electrical systems, failure to maintain proper safety equipment, witness statements about the deliberate power shutoff that endangered an infant's life. Papers shuffled. This file has already been submitted to the Housing Authority, with copies to the District Attorney's Office. The timestamps show the complaint was filed this morning. Now wait just a minute. Greeley blustered. I'm waiting, Cal replied evenly. And while we wait, you might want to consider that removing a documented medical alert animal from a critically ill infant could constitute reckless endangerment. Ione heard murmuring from what must be the animal control officers. We're going to need to verify some of these claims, one officer said carefully. Given the nature of these allegations, we can't proceed with removal without additional authorization. This is ridiculous. Greeley's voice rose. I have every right. You have the right to remain silent. Cal cut in. I'd strongly suggest exercising it while your lawyer reviews these documents. Inside the apartment, Ione's phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Cal. Legal help incoming. Hold tight. Moments later, her phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Miss Duval? This is Patricia Martinez from the Union Legal Defense Fund. Mr. Whitford contacted us about your situation. I'm already filing for an emergency stay on Dr. Keeler's surgical order, pending the completion of ongoing diagnostic tests. Ione could hear rapid typing in the background as the attorney spoke. The labs were ordered by a licensed respiratory therapist as part of standard care. Rushing to surgery without ruling out other diagnoses could constitute medical negligence. But the court order, Ione started, is being challenged as we speak. Martinez assured her. We're requesting a brief stay, just long enough for the lab results to come back. No judge wants to authorize potentially unnecessary surgery on an infant. In the hallway, the voices had grown quieter. She heard footsteps retreating, then Cal's gentle knock. When she opened the door, he stood there with a satisfied smile. Animal control's backing off for now, he reported. They'll need to investigate the code violations before taking any action, and Greeley's not looking so confident with that complaint file in play. Ione sagged against the doorframe in relief. Thank you, Cal. I don't know how you always keep good records. He winked. My old captain taught me that. Speaking of which, he pulled out his phone and took several photos of Bracken still maintaining his position with Keaton, the shepherd's careful pressure visibly helping the baby's breathing remain steady. More documentation for the file, he explained. The more evidence we have of Bracken's medical alert roll, the harder it'll be for them to remove him. Ione's phone buzzed again, this time with a text from Nella. Labs expedited. Should have results within 24 hours. Hang in there. She looked at the growing team rallying around her. Cal standing guard in the doorway, Martinez working to hold off surgery, Nella pushing the labs through, and Bracken, still maintaining his unwavering vigil over Keaton. For the first time since this crisis began, she felt the odds shifting in their favor. The German shepherd adjusted his position slightly, maintaining perfect pressure as Keaton's breathing shifted. His amber eyes remained alert, monitoring every tiny change in the baby's condition. On the blue carpet that had become their center of operations, dog and infant remained connected. Bracken's head rising and falling with each precious breath, his instincts providing vital support while the humans around them fought to buy time for answers. A new text from Martinez flashed on her phone. "Stay granted. 24 hours to receive lab results. We'll call with details." Ione sank down onto the carpet beside her son and his guardian. They had won this round, but she knew the fight was far from over. For now, though, they had what they needed most: time and each other. Ione's phone lit up at 6:15 in the morning. Nella's name flashed on the screen, and Ione's heart jumped into her throat. "The labs are back," Nella said without preamble, her voice tight with urgency. "I need you to come in right away. Bring Keaton, and Bracken too." 40 minutes later, Ione hurried through the hospital's side entrance, Keaton bundled against her chest and Bracken padding silently beside them. Nella met them in a small consultation room, spreading papers across the table. "That's infant botulism," Nella said, pointing to highlighted sections of the lab report. "The stool samples confirmed it." "This explains everything. The paralysis, the breathing problems, all of it." Ione sank into a chair, Keaton secure in her arms. "Botulism? Like from bad food?" "In babies this young, it's usually from bacterial spores in the environment," Nella explained. "They get into the intestines and produce a toxin that blocks nerve signals to the muscles. That's why he's having trouble moving and breathing." She pulled out a diagram showing nerve endings and muscle fibers. "See how the toxin interferes with these signals? That's what causes the flaccid paralysis, when the muscles get too weak to work properly. And the apnea episodes happen when the breathing muscles are affected." Bracken settled at Ione's feet, his head resting against Keaton's dangling foot. The baby's breathing remained steady under his touch. "But it's treatable?" Ione asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Very treatable," Nella assured her. "With antitoxin and supportive care, most babies make a full recovery. The key is getting the right treatment started quickly." "But Dr. Keeler insisted it was a spinal lesion?" Ione said, anger creeping into her voice. "He pushed for immediate surgery." "About that," Nella said grimly. She pulled another document from her stack. "You need to see this too." Before she could explain further, Ione's phone buzzed. It was California. "Put me on speaker," he said when she answered. "Both of you need to hear this." Nella leaned in close to the phone as Cal's voice filled the small room. "I've been digging into Keeler's connections," he said. "He's on the advisory board for Medicor surgical devices. They make the exact type of spinal hardware he wanted to use on Keaton. And get this, he receives significant consulting fees for every unit placed." Ione's hands began to shake. "He wanted to operate on my baby for money?" "It gets worse," Cal continued. "The company's facing scrutiny over complication rates in infant patients. They need more successful cases to maintain their FDA approval. Keeler's been one of their strongest advocates." "That's why he was in such a hurry," Nella said quietly. "He needed to get the surgery done before anyone could question his diagnosis." Ione looked down at Keaton, remembering how close they'd come to unnecessary surgery. Bracken pressed closer, offering silent support. "I've documented everything," Cal said. "The financial connections, the pressure tactics, all of it. And Nella, those lab results came at exactly the right time." "I have all the medical documentation here," Nella confirmed. "The botulism test results, the correlation with symptoms, the recommended treatment protocol, it's ironclad." Ione straightened in her chair, steel entering her spine. "What do we do now?" "We compile everything," Cal said firmly. "The lab results, Nella's clinical notes, your detailed logs of Keaton's symptoms and Bracken's alerts. We create a complete timeline showing how Keeler pushed for surgery while ignoring signs that pointed to botulism. I'll add my formal statement about ordering the toxin tests," Nella added, "and my observations of Bracken's responses to Keaton's breathing changes." That dog knew something was wrong before any of our monitors picked it up. As if acknowledging his role, Bracken shifted position, maintaining gentle pressure on Keaton's torso as the baby's breathing pattern changed slightly. Ione watched in amazement as her son's chest rose and fell in a stronger rhythm under the dog's careful touch. "He's been right all along," she murmured, running her hand over Bracken's soft fur. "Every single time." They worked quickly, assembling the documents into a coherent packet. Nella provided medical translations for the technical terms, while Cal added context about standard diagnostic protocols. And patient rights. Ione contributed her detailed logs, including timestamps of Bracken's alerts and their correlation with Keaton's breathing episodes. "The court needs to see this right away," Cal said. "The emergency hearing is at 10 o'clock. This evidence completely undermines Keeler's argument for immediate surgery. And more importantly," Nella added, "it shows that delaying surgery wasn't just reasonable, it was crucial for getting the correct diagnosis. Keaton needs antitoxin treatment, not spinal surgery." Ione gathered Keaton closer, feeling stronger with each passing moment. The fear that had haunted her since this began was transforming into purposeful energy. They had facts now, not just maternal instinct. They had evidence, not just desperate pleas. "We'll need copies," she said decisively. "One for the court, one for the hospital ethics board, one for our records." "Already ahead of you," Nella said, pulling fresh papers from the printer. 3 complete sets, everything dated and initialed. Cal's voice came through the phone again. "I'll meet you at the courthouse in an hour." The union lawyer is already there, filing the updated motion. This isn't just about stopping the surgery anymore. It's about getting Keaton the treatment he actually needs. Bracken's ears perked up at the change in Ione's voice and posture. He stood, ready to move, while maintaining his protective position near Keaton. His amber eyes held steady, reflecting the same determination Ione felt growing inside her. She looked at the packet of documents, truth captured in paper and ink. No more confusion, no more intimidation. The path forward was clear. Get the facts before the judge, stop the unnecessary surgery, and start the right treatment for her son. "Thank you both," she said softly. "I couldn't have done this alone." "You were never alone," Nella replied, squeezing her shoulder. "You had Bracken from the start, showing us what to look for. We just needed to pay attention." Ione gathered her strength and stood, Keaton secure in her arms, Bracken at her side, and the evidence packet held like a shield. They had fought their way this far with instinct and determination. Now they would finish this fight with facts and truth. Together, they moved towards the door, ready to face whatever came next. The time for defense was over. Now it was their turn to act. The courthouse loomed before them, its stone facade catching the morning light. Ione clutched the evidence packet in one hand while carefully holding Keaton with the other. Cal stood beside her, his presence steady and reassuring. They had arrived 20 minutes early for the emergency hearing, determined to be prepared. "Everything's going to be okay," Cal said softly, guiding them through the metal detectors. "We have the truth on our side now." The union lawyer, Sarah Chen, met them in the hallway outside courtroom 3. Her quick eyes took in the thickness of their documentation as she reached for the packet. "Perfect timing," she said, flipping through the pages. "I'll make sure Judge Harrison sees these lab results first. They're the key to stopping this unnecessary surgery." Inside the courtroom, Dr. Keeler sat with his legal team, his perfectly pressed suit a stark contrast to Ione's wrinkled clothes from another sleepless night. But Ione held her head high, drawing strength from the evidence in their hands. Nella arrived just before the hearing began, still wearing her hospital scrubs. She'd come straight from her shift, carrying additional copies of her sworn statement about Keaton's symptoms and their consistency with infant botulism. Judge Harrison, a woman with steel-grey hair and reading glasses perched on her nose, called the emergency hearing to order. "We're here to review the surgical authorization for infant Keaton Duval. I understand there's new medical evidence?" Sarah Chen stood. "Yes, Your Honor. We have conclusive lab results showing that Keaton Duval is suffering from infant botulism, not a spinal lesion. We also have documentation of Dr. Keeler's financial connection to the surgical device manufacturer he intended to use in this unnecessary procedure." The judge's eyebrows rose as she accepted the packet. She took her time reading through the lab results, Nella's statement, and Cal's documentation of Keeler's conflicts of interest. "Ms. Pike." The judge addressed Nella directly. "Please explain the significance of these test results." Nella stood, her voice clear and professional. "The lab tests show clear evidence of botulinum toxin, which causes the exact symptoms Keaton has been experiencing: muscle weakness, difficulty breathing, and paralysis-like effects. This condition requires immediate antitoxin treatment, not spinal surgery." Dr. Keeler's attorney tried to interject, but Judge Harrison held up her hand. "I'm more interested in hearing why these tests weren't run earlier, Dr. Keeler." Keeler's confident facade cracked slightly. "We were focused on the most likely diagnosis based on initial scans, which conveniently required the immediate use of surgical equipment from a company that pays you as an advisor." The judge's voice was sharp. The courtroom fell silent. Judge Harrison reviewed the documents once more, then looked directly at Ione. "Mrs. Duval, you've maintained impressive documentation throughout this ordeal. These detailed logs of your son's symptoms and your dog's alerts show a clear pattern that supports the botulism diagnosis." "Yes, Your Honor," Ione replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Bracken recognized something was wrong before anyone else did. He's been helping Keaton breathe through the worst episodes." The judge nodded, then straightened in her chair. "I'm issuing an immediate stay on the surgical order. Furthermore, I'm authorizing emergency antitoxin treatment for infant Keaton Duval to begin as soon as possible. Ms. Pike, can you ensure the hospital has this medication available?" "Yes, Your Honor. We have Baby Big ready in our pharmacy." "Then let's not waste any more time." This hearing is adjourned. The next hour passed in a blur of activity. They rushed back to the hospital, where Nella had already set everything in motion. The antitoxin was brought up from the pharmacy, while nurses prepared Keaton for treatment. Ione sat beside her son's hospital bed, holding his tiny hand as the medication began flowing through his IV. Cal stood guard by the door, organizing copies of all their documentation into separate files. Bracken lay at the foot of the bed, his amber eyes never leaving Keaton's face. The first signs of improvement came gradually. 2 hours after the antitoxin began, Ione noticed Keaton's eyelids moving more strongly. Another hour later, his fingers curled more responsively around her thumb. "Look," she whispered to Cal, tears streaming down her face. "He's getting stronger." Cal smiled, patting her shoulder. "That he is. But we're keeping every scrap of paper, every test result, every log entry. Something tells me we might need them." Dr. Keeler appeared in the doorway then, his smile tight and professional. "I see the antitoxin is having some effect. We'll continue to monitor." "Thank you, Doctor," Cal interrupted smoothly. "We'll be sure to include your visit in our ongoing documentation." Something flickered behind Keeler's eyes. Frustration, perhaps, or concern. But his smile never wavered as he turned and left. The afternoon sun slanted through the hospital windows, casting warm light across the room. Keaton had fallen into a peaceful sleep, his breathing stronger and more regular than it had been in days. Bracken, seeming to sense the immediate danger had passed, finally relaxed his vigilant posture. The big shepherd moved from the foot of the bed to the familiar blue carpet that Ione had brought from home. He sprawled out, still keeping Keaton in his sight, but allowing himself to truly rest for the first time since this ordeal began. Ione watched her son's chest rise and fall, each breath a tiny victory. She didn't feel the urge to gloat or celebrate. She was too tired, too relieved, too aware that they needed to remain vigilant. But she allowed herself to sink into the chair beside Keaton's bed, letting out a long breath of her own. "Get some rest," Cal said softly, settling into the other chair with his stack of files. "I'll keep watch for a while." Nella poked her head in, smiling at the peaceful scene. "His vital signs are improving steadily. The antitoxin is doing exactly what it should." Ione nodded gratefully, too emotional to speak. She reached down to stroke Bracken's fur, thanking him silently for everything he'd done. The shepherd's tail thumped once against the carpet, his eyes heavy with contentment as Keaton's steady breathing filled the quiet room. The acrid smell hit Ione first. She jolted awake in her apartment, heart pounding as smoke seeped under her door. Bracken was already up, his ears alert and nose working. The German shepherd's low growl sent chills down her spine. Through the thin walls, she heard screaming and running footsteps. The smoke detector in the hallway finally shrieked to life, its warning piercing the pre-dawn darkness. "Oh, God," Ione whispered, scrambling to grab Keaton from his crib. Her hands shook as she quickly strapped him to her chest with the baby carrier. The smoke was getting thicker, curling around the door frame like ghostly fingers. She grabbed the diaper bag, stuffing in Keaton's medication and their crucial medical documents. Bracken paced anxiously between her and the door, his tail low and tense. When she touched the door handle, it was warm, not scorching, but enough to make her hesitate. She had to make a choice. Stay and risk being trapped, or try for the stairs. The decision was made for her, as flames roared to life somewhere below, their heat pressing against the door like a living thing. The sound of breaking glass and splintering wood echoed up the stairwell. "Please, please, please," Ione muttered, clutching Keaton closer. She cracked open the door and immediately recoiled from the wall of heat that rushed in. Smoke billowed through the gap, making her eyes water and throat burn. She stumbled backward, twisting her ankle on a fallen throw pillow. Pain shot up her leg as she collapsed against the wall. Keaton began to cry, the sound muffled against her chest. "We're trapped," she choked out, panic clawing at her chest. The smoke was getting thicker, making it harder to think straight. Bracken barked sharply, once, twice, then dropped to his belly and crawled toward her. His meaning was clear: get down where the air was clearer. Ione followed his lead, dropping to her hands and knees. The shepherd moved with purpose now, heading to the far corner of the living room where an old return vent sat near the floor. The metal grate was loose, its screws long since stripped. Bracken nosed at it persistently until it popped free, revealing a maintenance crawlspace behind the wall. Hope flared in Ione's chest. The building was old, full of these service spaces between apartments. If they could just... Bracken didn't wait for her to finish the thought. He grabbed the diaper bag in his teeth and dragged it through the opening. Then he came back and positioned himself halfway in the crawlspace, creating a bridge with his body. "You want me to..." Ione's question was cut off by another crash from the stairwell. The heat was intense now, and the smoke was so thick she could barely see across the room. Bracken barked again. Short, urgent sounds. Ione understood. She army-crawled forward, using Bracken's body as a guide to maneuver herself and Keaton into the narrow space. The shepherd squeezed in behind them, essentially sealing off the opening from the smoke. The crawlspace was tight and dark, but breathable. Ione could feel cool air flowing from somewhere ahead. She began inching forward on her elbows, trying to keep Keaton cushioned between her and the floor. Outside, she heard sirens growing closer. Fire engine brakes squealed as they arrived at the building. Bracken suddenly began barking again, not his usual alert bark, but a rhythmic pattern. 3 short, 1 long, repeated over and over. Through the wall she heard a familiar voice shouting, "That's Bracken." "I know that pattern. It's a location signal." Cal's voice carried even through the chaos. "They're in the wall between units 3 and 4. The next few minutes were a blur of sound and sensation. Power tools whined against the exterior wall. Light suddenly burst through as a section of siding fell away. Hands reached in. Firefighters in full gear. "Here!" "We've got them," someone called out. Ione felt herself being carefully pulled through the opening, Keaton still strapped safely to her chest. Bracken scrambled out right behind them, the diaper bag still clenched in his teeth. The cool morning air hit her smoke-stained face like a blessing. She gulped it in greedily, then looked down at Keaton in terror. He coughed, a beautiful, terrible sound that meant he was breathing. He was alive. Paramedics swarmed them immediately, fitting oxygen masks over both their faces. Through the chaos, Ione saw Cal running toward them, his face etched with worry. Behind him, flames licked out of the third-floor windows where her apartment had been. "Pierce Greeley," Cal spat out as he reached them. Security cameras caught him going into the storage room with gasoline just before the fire started. Police have him in custody already. Ione barely registered his words. She was focused on Keaton, watching his chest rise and fall under the tiny oxygen mask. Bracken sat pressed against her leg, still holding the diaper bag that contained all their important documents. "The dog," one of the paramedics said in amazement. "He led them to the crawl space? And kept that bag with their medical records? That's Bracken," Cal said proudly, reaching down to ruffle the shepherd's ears. "He's been saving their lives since day one." As the paramedics checked them over, Ione watched her building burn. Everything she owned was in there, but she had what mattered: her son breathing against her chest, their loyal protector at her side, and proof of everything they'd endured safely preserved in that diaper bag. She reached down to touch Bracken's head, her fingers trembling. "Good boy," she whispered through the oxygen mask. "Such a good boy." The shepherd's tail thumped once against the pavement, and he leaned his weight more firmly against her leg. Together, they watched the firefighters battle the blaze as dawn broke over the smoking building, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Ione watched from the hospital parking lot as 2 police officers led Pierce Greeley toward a waiting patrol car. His pressed shirt was rumpled now, his slicked-back hair disheveled. The handcuffs gleamed in the morning sun as they clicked around his wrists. "We have him on multiple counts," Detective Sarah Martinez told her, flipping through her notes. "Arson, reckless endangerment, criminal negligence. The security footage Cal provided shows him entering the storage room with a gas can at 5:43 this morning, and that's just today's charges." Cal stood beside Ione, his arms crossed over his chest. The power cut documentation and tenant statements are ready too. 8 different residents saw him tampering with the breaker panel that night. Detective Martinez nodded. "We'll add those to the endangerment charges." The pattern of harassment is clear. Greeley caught sight of them watching, his face twisted with rage. "That mutt shouldn't have been in my building!" he shouted as the officers guided him into the back seat. "You broke the lease!" Ione didn't flinch. She'd spent too many months being afraid of this man. Now, watching him reduced to impotent fury in the back of a police car, she felt only tired determination. There would be no more fear. "Let's get these statements filed," Detective Martinez said, closing her notebook. "We'll need you both to come down to the station later today." Cal squeezed Ione's shoulder. "I'll drive you. But first, let's check on Keaton." They found Nella Pike in Keaton's room, reviewing his latest vitals. The baby was sleeping peacefully in his crib, his color good, his breathing strong and steady. Bracken lay beside the crib, one paw resting protectively on Keaton's fallen blanket. "His oxygen levels are perfect," Nella reported with a smile. "The smoke exposure was minimal, thanks to your quick thinking. And the antitoxin continues to work beautifully." Ione sagged into the chair beside the crib, relief washing over her. "Thank you, Nella, for everything. I've prepared all my documentation for the hospital board hearing," Nella said, her voice turning serious. "Every test result, every observation, every consultation note. They can't ignore the evidence." Cal nodded approvingly. "Between your medical records and our documentation of Keeler's conflict of interest with that surgical device company, the board will have to take action." "Speaking of action," Nella said, "several reporters have been calling the ward asking about your story. they're particularly interested in Bracken. The German shepherd's ears perked up at his name, but he didn't move from his post beside Keaton's crib. Ione shook her head. No media. Not now. This isn't about headlines or hero dogs. It's about making sure no other parent gets pressured into unnecessary surgery because a doctor has a financial stake in the procedure. The board hearing is scheduled for next Wednesday, Cal said. We'll present everything then, through the proper channels. Later that afternoon, after giving their statements at the police station, Cal drove Ione back to the apartment building. The fire damage was mostly contained to the upper floors, but the acrid smell of smoke still hung in the air. Yellow police tape crossed the entrance. The fire marshal allowed them up to Ione's unit to retrieve any salvageable belongings. The blue carpet that had witnessed so much was streaked with soot and water damage. Ione stood in the doorway, looking at that small patch where Bracken had first alerted her to Keaton's breathing problems months ago. We can get you set up in a temporary apartment, Cal said gently. The tenants' rights organization I contacted has emergency housing available. Ione nodded, but her mind was already moving forward. We'll need copies of everything for the hearing. The incident logs, the power cut documentation, the security footage, plus Nella's medical records and the proof of Keela's connection to that surgical device company. Already organized and backed up in 3 different places, Cal assured her. No one can bury this evidence. Back at the hospital, Ione found Bracken still maintaining his vigil beside Keaton's crib. The baby was awake now, making soft cooing sounds as he played with a small stuffed animal. His movements were stronger every day as the antitoxin did its work. Nella came in with fresh vital signs printouts. Dr. Keela tried to access Keaton's chart again today, she reported, but the board has already restricted him pending the hearing. He can't make any more treatment decisions. Good, Ione said firmly. She sat down beside the crib and reached through the bars to stroke Keaton's cheek. He grabbed her finger with surprising strength, bringing a smile to her face. The police called while you were out. Nella continued. They found more evidence in Greeley's office. Records of other tenants he's harassed, maintenance requests he ignored, safety violations he covered up. They're building a strong case. Ione nodded, but kept her focus on Keaton. The victories were adding up, but she couldn't celebrate yet. There was still work to do, still systems to hold accountable. We'll need your full statement for the board hearing, she told Nella, about how you recognized the botulism symptoms, how Keela dismissed your concerns, everything. Already written up, Nella assured her, with supporting documentation from 3 other staff members who witnessed similar incidents. Cal arrived with dinner for everyone, simple sandwiches from the hospital cafeteria. They ate quietly, reviewing their evidence and planning their presentation for the board. Bracken accepted his share of turkey, but remained alert beside the crib. You know, Cal said thoughtfully, we could probably sell this story to one of those inspirational magazines. Hero Dog Saves Baby Exposes Corruption. They'd eat it up. Ione shook her head. That's not what this is about. We're not looking for publicity or praise. We just need to make sure this doesn't happen to another family. She gathered their documentation into neat piles. Medical records, incident logs, police reports, witness statements. Each page represented a piece of the truth they'd fought so hard to uncover and protect. The board hearing will handle Keela, she said firmly. The courts will deal with Greeley. We'll let the system work, now that we have proof that can't be ignored. Bracken's tail thumped against the floor in quiet approval. Above them, the hospital's fluorescent lights hummed steadily. In his crib, Keaton slept peacefully, his breathing strong and even. The room felt like a sanctuary now, not a battlefield. Ione looked at her small team, Cal with his steady wisdom, Nella with her quiet courage, Bracken with his unwavering dedication. They had won not through force or fear, but through patience, documentation, and an unshakable commitment to the truth. The fight wasn't over, but the end was in sight, and this time they would finish it the right way, in boardrooms and courtrooms, with evidence and testimony. No more desperate stands, no more late-night terrors, just the steady march toward justice, one documented fact at a time. The hospital boardroom felt impossibly large. Dark wood panels lined the walls, and a massive table dominated the space. 14 board members sat in high-backed leather chairs, their expressions carefully neutral as they reviewed the thick folders before them. Ione smoothed her plain navy dress and took her seat at the presentation table. Her hands trembled slightly as she arranged her documents, but her voice remained steady when the board chairman called the hearing to order. "I'd like to start at the beginning," Ione said, meeting the eyes of each board member. 8 months ago, my son Keaton began experiencing breathing difficulties. Our dog Bracken, a trained medical alert animal, was the first to notice. She walked them through the timeline, her voice growing stronger with each detail. The initial emergency, the rushed diagnosis, the pressure for immediate surgery. Her careful documentation of Keaton's symptoms and Bracken's alerts painted a clear picture of a mother fighting for answers, not defying medical authority. "I requested time to understand the diagnosis," she explained. "Instead, I was threatened with child services involvement if I didn't immediately consent to spinal surgery." The board chairman's eyebrows rose. "Threatened? Can you be more specific?" Ione pulled out her detailed logs. "On March 15th at 2:45 in the afternoon," Dr. Keeler stated, and I quote, "Refusing necessary medical treatment could trigger a child welfare investigation. Is that what you want?" Nella Pike stepped forward next, her hospital ID badge catching the fluorescent light. Her plain scrubs and practical shoes stood in stark contrast to Keeler's tailored suit, but her expertise filled the room. "Infant botulism presents with descending flaccid paralysis," she explained, pointing to slides showing Keaton's progression. "The paralysis affects breathing muscles, causing episodes of apnea, breathing stoppage. Without proper diagnosis, it can mimic other neurological conditions." She displayed Keaton's lab results. The toxin test was definitive. Standard treatment is human-derived antitoxin, which Keaton received after the court order. His improvement was immediate and documented. The board leaned forward as Nella showed week-by-week comparisons of Keaton's muscle strength and breathing patterns. "This is typical recovery with proper treatment. No surgical intervention was ever needed." Cal Whitford took the floor next, his firefighters bearing lending weight to every word. He laid out a timeline of financial documents and correspondence between Keeler and the surgical device manufacturer. "Dr. Keeler serves as a paid consultant for Medispine Technologies," Cal stated. "He receives significant compensation for each spinal surgery performed using their devices. This arrangement was not disclosed to Miss Duval when he pushed for immediate surgery." He placed copies of contracts and bank transfers on the table. "In the past year alone, Dr. Keeler has received $127,000 in consulting fees and per-surgery payments from this company." The board members exchanged glances. One woman in wire-rimmed glasses studied the financial records intently. Keeler stood then, straightening his tie. The patient presented with symptoms consistent with spinal compression. Given the potential for permanent paralysis, immediate surgical intervention was warranted. Any delay could have been catastrophic. "And yet," the chairman interrupted, "when alternative testing was suggested, you actively discouraged it. Why?" "Time was critical," Keeler insisted. "Every hour of delay increased the risk. According to these records," the woman in wire rims said, "you attempted to schedule surgery before all standard neurological tests were completed. That's against hospital protocol." "I was acting in the patient's best interest," Keeler said, his polished manner showing cracks. "By threatening a single mother with child services?" Another board member asked. "By dismissing the observations of experienced staff? By failing to disclose your financial interest in the proposed surgery?" Keeler's jaw tightened. "I stand by my medical judgment." The board called a brief recess to review all evidence. Ione waited in the hallway, where Bracken sat alert beside Cal. The dog's steady presence helped calm her racing heart. When they were called back in, the chairman's expression was grave. "Dr. Keeler, this board finds clear evidence of ethical violations and deviation from accepted standards of care. Your hospital privileges are suspended pending a full investigation into all cases involving Medispine Technologies devices over the past 5 years. Keeler started to protest, but the chairman held up his hand. Additionally, we will be referring this matter to the State Medical Board for review. This hearing is adjourned. Ione didn't smile or celebrate. She simply gathered her documents, thanked the board for their time, and walked out with her head high. In the corridor, Bracken fell into step beside her, matching her measured pace. "You did it," Cal said quietly. "We did it?" Ione corrected. "All of us together." Nella joined them, still holding her presentation materials. "The system worked this time. Because we made it work." They walked together toward Keaton's room, where he was recovering stronger every day. The hospital corridors seemed brighter somehow, as if a shadow had lifted, not from victory or vindication, but from truth finally reaching the light. Bracken trotted ahead, tail held high, leading them forward. He had known all along about Keaton's real condition, about the people they could trust, about the path through darkness to dawn. Now, like his human companions, he carried himself with the quiet dignity of one who had stood firm for what was right. At Keaton's door, they paused. Through the window, they could see him sleeping peacefully, his breathing strong and steady. The monitors showed healthy readings. The blue hospital blanket rose and fell with each clear breath. "I need to update his charts," Nella said softly, touching Ione's shoulder before heading to the nurse's station. "And I should call the attorney, let her know how it went?" Cal added. Ione nodded, still watching her son. The fear that had lived in her chest these past months was finally easing, not because they had won, but because the truth had prevailed, because good people had stood together, because sometimes justice simply needed a clear voice and an unwavering heart. Bracken sat beside her, his calm presence anchoring her in this moment of quiet victory. They had faced the storm together, mother, child, dog, and allies, and together they had found their way to safer shores. Sunlight streamed through fresh white curtains, casting warm patterns across the new blue carpet in Keaton's nursery. 6 weeks had passed since the hospital board hearing, and each day brought small but precious victories. Ione sat cross-legged on the floor, watching as Keaton pushed himself up on sturdy arms. His movements were getting stronger, more deliberate. When she held out her finger, his tiny hand wrapped around it with surprising strength. "Look at you, my strong boy," she whispered, her heart swelling with joy. Bracken lay nearby, his golden and black coat gleaming in the morning light. His amber eyes tracked every movement Keaton made, but his posture was relaxed now, alert but peaceful. The constant tension of those frightening weeks had eased from his muscular frame. A soft kick caught Ione's hand as Keaton tested his renewed mobility. These weren't the weak twitches of before. These were proper baby kicks, full of life and intention. Tears pricked at her eyes, but they were happy ones. "He's really coming along." Cal's voice came from the doorway. He carried a box of crib parts, his silver hair catching the sunlight. "Every day," Ione agreed, wiping her eyes quickly. "The doctors say his recovery is remarkable." Cal set down the box and pulled out the assembly instructions. "Speaking of remarkable, how did Bracken's certification go?" Ione's face brightened. Perfect scores across the board. The evaluator said she'd never seen such precise medical alerting instincts. They've officially certified him as Keaton's service dog. Bracken's tail thumped against the carpet at the sound of his name. The new ID tags on his collar caught the light, official validation of what they had known all along about his life-saving abilities. Cal began laying out crib pieces methodically. "Sarah's glad you took the place," he said, referring to his sister. "She's been wanting a long-term tenant she could trust." The mention of their new home made Ione look around appreciatively. The rental house was modest but solid. New wiring, secure doors and windows, and a small fenced yard where Bracken could stretch his legs. After the nightmare of Greeley's building, It felt like a sanctuary. The blue carpet was such a thoughtful touch, Ione said softly. She ran her fingers through the fresh, clean fibers, so different from the threadbare one where their journey had begun. She didn't have to do that. Sarah understood what it meant. Cal replied, starting to fit the crib rails together. Sometimes a fresh start needs those familiar anchors. They worked in comfortable silence for a while, Cal assembling the crib with steady hands, Ione organizing baby supplies, Bracken and Keaton playing quietly on their special carpet. The scene felt both new and familiar, like the first notes of a favorite song played on different instruments. "Cal," Ione said finally, her voice careful. "I don't know how to thank you for everything." He paused in his work, looking at her with those steady eyes. "You don't need to. I do, though. You believed me when it mattered. You helped me fight when I was scared. You—" She gestured around the sunny room. "You helped give us a future." Cal set down the screwdriver, choosing his words with characteristic care. "What I saw was a mother fighting for her child with everything she had. All I did was stand with you, which is what friends do." Their eyes met in a moment of quiet understanding. There was warmth there, and trust, but no pressure for more than they were ready to give. They had been through too much together to rush or risk what was growing between them, this careful, honest friendship that might someday become something more. Besides, Cal added with a small smile, Bracken did the hard part. As if on cue, the German shepherd shifted position, allowing Keaton to use his sturdy frame as support while practicing sitting up. The baby's giggles filled the room as Bracken gently nuzzled his hair. The crib came together piece by piece under Cal's skilled hands. Ione worked alongside him, passing parts and holding sections steady. Their movements had an easy rhythm, born of shared purpose and growing trust. When the last screw was tightened, they stood back to admire their work. The crib stood strong and secure, its warm wood gleaming, another piece of their new life clicking into place. "Perfect timing for his nap," Ione said, noting Keaton's drowsy eyes. She lifted him gently, but instead of placing him in the new crib, she settled back down on the blue carpet. Bracken immediately curled around them both, creating the familiar nest of warmth and safety. Cal watched as Keaton snuggled against Bracken's fluffy chest, his breathing deep and easy. No monitors needed now, no fear haunting each breath, just peace and the steady rise and fall of sleep. "I'll finish unpacking those boxes in the kitchen," he said softly, understanding this was their special moment. Ione smiled up at him gratefully. "Stay for dinner?" "I'm making lasagna." "Wouldn't miss it," he replied, his footsteps quiet as he left the room. Sitting there in the warm afternoon light, Ione marveled at how far they'd come. The terror of those early days felt distant now, like a storm passed over. In its place was this, a safe home, a healing child, a faithful dog, and people who had proved their worth in the darkest hours. Bracken's amber eyes met hers, full of that ancient canine wisdom that had guided them through the crisis. His tail wagged once, slowly, as if to say all was well. Keaton's tiny hand clutched Bracken's fur as he slept, holding on with the strength that grew more sure each day. His face was peaceful, cheeks pink with health, body relaxed in complete trust. Ione leaned back against the wall, letting the quiet joy of the moment wash over her. This was what she had fought for, not just survival, but the chance for her son to thrive, to grow up surrounded by love and loyalty, protected by both human hearts and a dog's miraculous devotion. The blue carpet beneath them was soft and new, yet it carried echoes of that first desperate day when Bracken had alerted them to danger. Now it was transformed into something else, a foundation for their future, a place where miracles could happen in ordinary moments. Through the window, she could hear birds singing in the backyard trees. From the kitchen came the gentle sounds of Cal unpacking dishes, making himself at home in their new world. And here, in this sun-warmed room, Bracken kept his eternal watch over his sleeping charge, a guardian whose love had helped write their story of survival and hope. This was their victory, not loud or showy, but quiet and complete. A mother's resolve, a friend's loyalty, and a good dog's miracle had brought them home at last. Thanks for watching. If any part of this story lingered with you, consider subscribing. I'll be here again tomorrow, sharing another tale that speaks to the soul.